Hello, I'm Steve Ptacek, Superintendent of Jacksonville School District 117. I'm posting two videos at the same time that each provide an update on Vision 117 Phase 3. This first video covers the presentation I gave to the Board of Education at the November 17th board meeting, and this presentation details some concerning enrollment data we have analyzed since the last update on Vision 117 and how our enrollment trends are impacting Phase 3. The second video, which is linked below, covers the presentation I will give to the Board of Education at the December 15th meeting. This details how we are planning on using ESSER funds and revenue generated from the online sales tax bond in Phase 3. We're going to be able to make improvements to our facilities that we did not think was possible for at least another 10 years due to these new limited funds. This slide was included in previous Phase 3 updates, so I'll go through this quickly. Following the successful sales tax referendum in November of 2014, we were able to use the sales tax revenue to sell bonds that provided the funds to complete the JMS project as Phase 1. The sales tax revenue was able to generate more funds than originally anticipated, allowing for the thorough renovations of Lincoln and South Elementary schools as Phase 2. The two bond sales were $32 million in 2015 and $10 million in 2017. And I want to highlight that these are being paid with sales tax revenue, not property taxes. With online sales tax being collected and distributed to the local level this year, we were able to collect another $12.6 million in bond sales. We also have nearly $10 million in federal ESSER funds that we must use by September 2024. We also must either spend or encumber 80% of that $12.6 million in bond sales by September of 2024. These funds are initiating Phase 3. Here's a summary of our progress on Phase 3. I covered the new sources of revenue in the previous slide. I want to also highlight that for the last 8 years, we've been building our fund balances, which are our savings account, to be able to complete needed improvements throughout the district. I'm going to revisit this at the end of this presentation and how this savings might be utilized in the future. The initial presentation on Phase 3 was given to the board at the April board meeting. This presentation was issued to the community as a YouTube video on May 14th. There is a link to that video below. That first presentation detailed several possible scenarios for Phase 3. At that time, it appeared that the two most likely outcomes for Phase 3 were going to either be a renovation, new construction of Murrayville-Woodson, or an expansion of South Elementary and the closure of Murrayville-Woodson. A group from Murrayville-Woodson attended the June 16th board meeting. The dialogue between community members, the board, and administration was very respectful and really represented our partnership. Not everyone agreed on each issue, but the respect for each other was apparent. I want to thank that group for coming to the meeting and representing your concerns as you did. The low enrollment at Murrayville-Woodson was a major topic of our conversation, and I do think everyone there was in agreement that if Murrayville-Woodson is going to stay open, we have to move the boundary north to capture more students into the Murrayville-Woodson school boundary. An important component of these two options, and for the rest of this presentation, is that we are currently in a 10 class per grade level elementary model, and this is based upon our enrollment. This includes 2 classes per grade level at our physically larger, more centralized schools, Eisenhower, Washington, Lincoln, and South, and 1 class per grade level at our smaller and more remote schools, North and Murrayville-Woodson. This totals 10 classes per grade level. This new structure was developed following our 2016-2017 reboundary process that coincided with the move of the 6th grade students to JMS. This process removed the need for Franklin choice, more equitably distributed our students throughout the district, removed the need for split classes, and reduced our overall staffing requirements. I'm going to briefly go over these two options. They were covered in the previous video, but since that video, we have more detailed architectural representations of what the Murrayville-Woodson renovation, new construction would entail. As covered in the previous video, the south expansion is going to be a new construction added on to the existing building. This expansion would allow South to serve both the current South population and the Murrayville-Woodson population. South would become a 3 class per grade level school Therefore, the district would remain a 10 class per grade level school in our elementary model. This would result in the closure of Murrayville-Woodson. The expected cost for this project is right around $6.8 million. Here are architectural drawings of the floor plans of this expansion. You have the existing South School through this area, and the expansion would be on the east side out here where we have plenty of room. The Murrayville-Woodson renovation and new construction would replace the 1917 and 1951 sections with new construction, with a new building. We would renovate the other sections. The expected cost is right around $9.1 million. This is the first time this is being publicly displayed. Here is the architectural drawings of what the front of the school would look like. It would be a one-floor building, and therefore it would be fully ADA compliant. Here's an overall architectural drawing of the floor plan and the layout. Here's a more detailed drawing of what the school would look like. The areas inside the red lines here would all be new construction. We've got the gym that'll be renovated, and the areas at the north part of the school, the newer sections that will be renovated, that everything else would be a new elementary school. So following that June 16th board meeting, what happened next? I returned to work to start preparing for an extensive community engagement process. This included the formation of a community engagement committee. I knew that committee was going to want to see all available data, including an exploration of how far north the boundary lines might have to be to capture enough students in the Murrayville-Woodson boundary to justify the expense of a renovation, new construction of the school. I used the exact same software we used for the 2016-2017 reboundary process. It was at this time I noticed the alarming fact that our K-5 enrollment had dropped nearly 100 students from September of 2016 to September of 2021. I needed to better understand our enrollment trends because K-5 enrollment determines our elementary model. It determines how many classes we have per grade level. So I began a much more involved evaluation of our enrollment. I had available and used the following resources to evaluate our enrollment trends. I had detailed enrollment data from 1968. We were able, through our own computer system, to get the district's enrollment data from 2009-10 school year to our current school year. I used the 2020 census report that just came out, and we also used a professional enrollment projection from PGAV planners out of St. Louis. We had in our office this interesting piece of Jacksonville School District history, the JSD117 enrollment from 1968. I want to highlight a couple interesting facts here. We had 9 elementary schools in 1968. Since then, Franklin, Jefferson, and Lafayette have closed, and Murrayville-Woodson was split into Murrayville Elementary and Woodson Elementary. Eisenhower did not open until 1972. So when you take out these 3, Franklin, Jefferson, Lafayette, and Woodson, and add in Eisenhower, that's where you get our current 6 schools. The enrollment for the district, I will highlight in the next slide also, was 5,210, substantially higher than it is right now. We'll go over that in more detail, but I want you to look at Lincoln Elementary, 474 students at Lincoln Elementary. We currently have somewhere around 250. We've been saying we don't know where they put all of the students in some of these elementary schools. South had 416 students, and South's one of our larger schools that we feel is at capacity right around 300. Jefferson had 471. The numbers are Washington at 385. So there were a lot of kids in each classroom back in 1968. Turner Junior High School had 732 kids in just 2 grade levels. Our high school had 1,436 students. There were a lot more students in Jacksonville School District in 1968. These 2 numbers are the best numbers in comparing the enrollment to the enrollment this year. One, as I stated in the last slide, our total district enrollment. Now this is K through 12, not pre-K through 12. There was not a pre-K program in the district in 1968, was 5,210, and here are the numbers for K through 5. So I took those numbers and just made this chart to have a direct comparison between 1968 and 2021. Our K through 12 enrollment was 5,210. We currently are at 2,901. Now we usually talk about the school district as a 3,100 to 3,200 student school district, but that is including the pre-K students added into that 2,901. Our K through 5 enrollment in 1968 was 2,511 compared to 1,305. The average students per grade level in 1968 was 418.5 compared to 217.5 this year. Average K through 5 students per class, these numbers are guessed because I don't know how many actual teachers they had per grade level in 1968. I didn't go back into all the different elementary yearbooks and count up the teachers. This is just a rough guess based upon what I know about the physical layouts of the school and the number of students. They were probably at best averaging 23 students a class. We're at 21.7. That is averaging somewhere between 16 and 23 classes per grade level, and our current model, as I've stated, is at 10. Here's a chart that shows our K through 5 enrollment from 2009-2010 to the current year. This information was readily available to us in our current student information system. In the 9-10 school year, we had 1,592 K through 5 students, down to the current 1,305. And here's the listing in that year for all the K through 5 students, with an average students in each grade level of 265. This is a cohort chart, and what that means is it's color-coded to show a group of students as they advance each year. In other words, 9-10, these students that were in kindergarten, the next year in 10-11 they were in first grade, then they were in second grade, third, fourth, fifth, and so on. So you can simply track the colors to see some of these enrollment trends and how they dropped. This group of students went from 284 to 210 by the 5th grade. Here's a 268 down to 245. Here's a 222 down to 219. That one stayed somewhat relatively the same size, but a 248 down to 241. So some of the classes stayed somewhat similar in size, others dropped substantially. But this overall number, 1,592 to 1,305, I needed to graphically represent. That gives a better visual representation of trends. So here's a graphical representation of our student enrollment from the 1968 point up here. This is K through 5 enrollment only at 2,511, and then those numbers I just showed you in the previous chart. This provides evidence of a steady decreasing enrollment trend over the last 50 years. Now we have this gap in between here that I wasn't able to readily find what our K through 5 numbers were. But I was able to look back and see what the overall district enrollment was. And here's our overall district enrollment from 1965 to 2009. Once again, this is overall enrollment, not K through 5 enrollment, so I could not take these plot points and put them into the previous graph. But what I wanted to do was to plot these out to see if we've had a similar linear regression in the years from 1968 to 2009, and it does show that that trend of decreasing enrollment has been taking place for over 50 years. PJV Planners out of St. Louis is a professional group that uses local, regional, state, and federal economic trends, business trends, population trends, to present a picture of what an area's population will look like into the near future. We wanted to see if their numbers and their predictions of what our population will look like into the future matched the linear trends that we have shown over the last 50 years. Unfortunately, they do. They use 3 different models. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, but the orange one right here is the CSR model. And on the last page, this is what they say is the most accurate tool for the next 3 to 5 years. And all of those show from our current into our projected a steady decrease. I want to highlight some important comments they made in this report. The CSR model forecast of total enrollment for the 25-26 school year is 151 students less than the moving average model and 75 less than the average model. The kindergarten enrollment is projected to be 52 students less by the 25-26 school year. That's just the kindergarten class. A closer examination of the projection indicates that most of the enrollment declines will occur in grades K through 8. In summary, this analysis indicates that the relative consistent and moderate decline in enrollment in recent years should carry forward into the future. Unless there are significant changes in the local or regional economy that would result in significant new housing construction, significant increases in birth rates, or other factors occur that would disrupt enrollment, there's no reason to believe that these projections are unreasonable. The CSR model will tend to be more precise over the short term, and the CSR model had the largest decrease. Thus, it is recommended that these projections be revisited and updated every 2 or 3 years. They're basically saying they have some unknowns that they could be off, but we need to evaluate these every 2 to 3 years. That's an important piece of my recommendation to the board. Here's the Morgan County and Jacksonville City census data changes from the 2010 census to the 2020 census. Morgan County saw an overall 7.4% drop in population. Jacksonville City saw a 9.4% drop in population. These numbers, once again, just support the concerns I have with our dropping enrollment. Now, when I've had these discussions with people, right away they ask, well, what's happening in Jacksonville? I want to highlight this is not a Jacksonville issue. This is a regional and a state issue. Jacksonville is a member of LUDA, which is the Large Unit District Association. And these are large school district units from across the state. The other schools throughout the state that are involved with LUDA are also concerned about their dropping enrollment. Recently, LUDA asked us to provide data of our enrollment from the last 2 years. Of the 47 schools that reported, 42 of them have had dropping enrollment in the last 2 years, with an average drop of 3.8%. That's this total line right here. These are all ranked from the highest percent drop to the lowest percent drop, and these 5 schools actually had gains in enrollment in the last 2 years. Our drop in the last 2 years was 4.84%. So we're above the average, but we're still kind of in that grouping in the middle. You look at Aurora East up here, it had a 9% drop in the last 2 years. Elgin, U46, with 38,000 students, the largest school district in the state outside of Chicago Public Schools, had a 5% drop in the last 2 years. They are currently going through a detailed process of closing multiple schools. The point of this slide is to show this is not a Jacksonville problem. This is a problem throughout the state of Illinois. Before I had received the projections into the future from PGAV, I had used Excel to create our own projections moving into the future. These are the fiscal years, and they always end with the year at the end of the year. Like it's the class of, this year's the class of 22, it's fiscal year 22. And that's why here, this is our current K through 5 enrollment in year 22 of 1,305 students. Here in year 10 was the enrollment of 1,592. And I took all of that data, put it into Excel with our average class sizes, and Excel has a prediction tool that then you're able to put in a year in the future, and it predicts based upon the data above what the enrollment will be into those years moving forward. Here is from next school year, which would be year 23, all the way up through year 35, what our K through 5 enrollment could possibly be. Down here, I have the number of classes per elementary grade level required, and I'm going to focus on this desired class size of 22 students. If we were in financial strain, I would start looking at a desired class of 24 students. It's more cost effective to put more kids in classes, but since we're not right now, we are in agreement that a slightly lower class size does have a positive impact on education. So if we design our model around an average class size of 22 students per class, at 10 classes per grade level, that would mean 220 students per grade level. 9 classes per grade level would mean 198 students per grade level. And 8 classes per grade level is when we would reach 176 students per grade level. These numbers show that the 26-27 school year, if the numbers continue, we would reach that 9 class per grade level plateau. Therefore, at that point in time, we could readily operate with only 9 classes per grade level, and this would result in the closure of one of our schools. I know this is sobering data, but we as a district need, in our fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers, to look at efficiencies. It costs anywhere from $700,000 to an extra $1 million a year without talking about renovation or remodeling costs to just operate an extra school of 1 class per grade level. So we do need to have serious consideration of, if our enrollment continues to drop, do we need to close the school? Remember, in 1968, we had 9 elementary schools. That 8 class per grade level mark at 176 students could happen in year 32 if our enrollment trends continue. Given this information, where does this leave us, and how has this all altered my recommendation to the Board of Education on Phase 3? If the enrollment trend continues, the discussion on the closure of an elementary school could start as soon as the fall of 2023, with a closure date as early as the 25-26 school year. Now, we would want to give at least a year of a community engagement process in determining, one, if we're going to close a school, and if we are, which to close. And then we would want at least another school year of working on restructuring all the district boundaries to ensure well in advance everyone knew where they were going to be going to school. So that's much more likely the 26-27 school year. When the district closed Franklin, they did so in an April board meeting for that summer, for the end of the school year. That put all of the Franklin students in a Franklin choice position. It was done so short, this district and this board will never do that again. We will give it the time and the consideration, have the community involved with another preparation and planning that everyone will have more than advance notice. We are committed to that. But given the uncertainty of our enrollment, I cannot, in good faith, recommend the district spend from $6.8 to $9.1 million on either of the Murrayville-Woodson project or the South expansion, since it's very possible we will be moving to a 9 class per grade level elementary system within the next 5 years. I have that responsibility to the entire taxpaying body of the district. So here is the recommendation I gave to the board at the November 17th meeting. I recommended that we continue with the Washington project. We need to spend or encumber 80% of the $12.4 million in bond proceeds from the recent sales tax bond by September of 2024. The Washington project will cover that requirement. Washington is a large school. It is in a densely populated area of our community, and it has very low transportation requirements. Therefore, it absolutely makes sense to renovate Washington and make that a permanent fixture in our community. We pause major Phase 3 improvements that are designed around a 10 class per grade level model, and we revisit this issue in the fall of 2023. We use the sales tax proceed and ESSER funds to complete emergency repairs of Murrayville-Woodson, and we develop a plan on how to utilize ESSER funds and the remaining sales tax dollars on projects that will have a lasting impact on this district and this community. That's the presentation I'm giving at the December 15th board meeting, and it's that information that will be covered in the second video that I will be posting at the same time I'm posting this video. Please watch that video also. Near the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned that we'd saved up a substantial amount of money on our fund balances, our savings account. By having that money in savings, we are also prepared for the possibility that our enrollment does not continue to decrease and that we do not have to close a school. Therefore, we will have somewhere around $10 million to be able to revisit the previously discussed Phase 3 recommendations of either the South expansion or the Murrayville-Woodson renovation, and the money will be there for those projects. So by spending the money from the ESSER funds and the sales tax bond on these other areas, we're not removing those as projects we can do in the future. Thank you very much for watching this video. I know this is a very sensitive topic. I welcome feedback. The board welcomes feedback, but at this point in time, there will not be any decision made on any elementary school until we get at least 2 more years of data. In the fall of 2023, we will revisit this topic, analyze the data, and definitely open this up for community involvement and community input. Thank you very much, and please watch the next video.